What I have up on my screen right now is Jamal's code that he had pushed up. And when we're going through a prototyping phase like we were doing, what we're actually not really focused on, in my opinion, is just trying to structure the code in a really elegant way. We're actually just trying to get things working. We're exploring. And to be totally honest, when I was trying to drive Jamal in a particular direction, I had some poor ideas that I was proposing. We were getting stuck, and when we finally got around to trying out Selenium, it was a lot less like hitting walls and getting stuck. And so I think that was a great suggestion. And as I was guiding Jamal through this, he was able to try out some things that were, I think, a little bit more advanced than we were planning for. But really, what we have is kind of all of the code dumped into one file. So that's the first thing to call out that I'm going to be showing you how I cleaned up. I'm anticipating that we're probably going to want to have some other scrapers as we're doing this, and as a result of that, I wanted to be able to kind of refactor out some of the Chrome setup for Selenium here. I did actually figure out what was wrong with this, and I should have caught it before, but the Chrome options that he's created never get passed into here. So I've corrected that in mine. We'll demonstrate that in just a moment. And another thing that's a pretty big change in mine, which I will show you, is that this method that we created, wait for page source contains, that's actually something that I feel like if we're going to have other Selenium based scrapers, we're going to want to reuse this. And so we're not copying and pasting it everywhere. I pulled it out into another library and I made it an extension method. So that way, when we're using it, it feels a little bit more natural, like it's built into the WebDriver. So that was one more thing. And the final part is that this code here, which actually does the sort of parsing, if you will, of the content of the HTML. I actually said this worked pretty well, and let's kind of bundle it up into a dedicated TikTok plugin. And furthermore, while we're getting the followers, what other information is pretty easy for us to get? So I made a record that will have the profile name, the URL, the follower count, and the following count, just because it's available, and why not kind of demonstrate that? So let's jump over to Visual Studio and I can kind of walk you through those changes that I've implemented. So I'll minimize this. Sorry that this was, really bright white background. If I jump over to here, this should hopefully be a little bit easier on the eyes. I'll zoom in a little bit more, try not to cut off anything here. But this is the same program.cs file that Jamal was working on, and you can see that it's only a couple of lines long now. It's not because I deleted all of his code. I actually added more code. I've just reorganized it. So what we're doing is we're going to make a TikTok profile fetcher. That's where I moved a lot of our code. And then we're going to ask it to fetch the profile for dev leader, which is what I use for my social media accounts. And this profile info that comes back, if you can see, I know it's probably really small font there, but the tooltip is showing that it is a profile info type. So that's the data structure I created. Then we just print that to the console. So clean this code up so that the program looks really lightweight. Let's start with the Chrome sort of reusable code for Selenium that I wanted to do. So if I jump over to this file here in this other new project that I've added, this is why I had Jamal create a solution that we could put multiple projects into and kind of name it Social Media Assistant and then all of the sub projects below. But to start, you can see that I added headless and I actually reduced some of the logging. It's very noisy in the console and would love it if it didn't log anything. This seems to help. And then you'll see that I pass in the Chrome options here. So that actually makes the headless part work, which we didn't have in our last video. So we can call this, it's a factory pattern just so we can create a Selenium WebDriver. So this is nice and reusable. It's only used in one spot right now, but I very much anticipate that we will be reusing this. Next up, I have this iWebDriver extension method class. I've put it right into this Open QA Selenium namespace though, and that way anytime we're going to use iWebDriver, this will make it feel like it's automatically accessible to us and kind of built into iWebDriver without really much other tweaking. This code itself didn't really change at all, except for I renamed the result type And then I added just I felt like it might be useful to actually provide in the result the text that we were looking to find. Not really necessary, just felt like that might be a quality of life thing that will come up later. So otherwise, this didn't change. And you can see that over here in this other file, I actually have, it's the same record that we had before. And like I mentioned, I added this property as well. Okay, so where did the rest of the code go? Well, if I jump over to this other class here, TikTok Selenium Profile Fetcher, this is organized a little bit different, and I'm trying to make sure it's not all cut off for you here, but if you recall, we had one regular expression that we were getting the follower count. I've just moved that up to be static. Um, I don't think it's going to be necessary based on how we run this for now, but I like kind of pulling out constant things like this that exist for the lifetime of an instance, but also the lifetime of the entire type itself as static read only. I can't make a constant here because a regex is not something that can be constant. In my opinion, this is the next best thing. We could make it lazy or something like that. Kind of overkill at this point. But you'll see that basically between these two regular expressions, followers, following. So we're going to be pulling both those pieces of information. Next up, I'm going to be using that Chrome WebDriver factory that I talked about. So all of that code that was pulled out into the factory, we're going to use it. And I just left a note here for the future that I'm going to be trying to show Jamal how we can use autofac to instantiate some of our classes and dependencies. So generally, I advise against this type of pattern where you basically create your dependencies with a concrete type directly in your constructor. My opinion when it comes to testability and stuff like that, this is a big no-no, but I wanted to leave this for later so that we can have an exercise to go clean that up. If I go refactor it now, it's basically zero benefit, so we'll do it later. Next up, I created this method to fetch async. Right now, it's not actually asynchronous at all. This will be blocking, but I'm thinking a little bit ahead when we go to make these plugins. I'm thinking that this might be a nice API that we can have on an interface, and all of the plugins can follow a scheme, something like this. But we'll see as that evolves. I added this little check here. Um, when we're talking about social media handles, some different social media sites actually, um, it's common to prepend the @ sign, and I figured like if someone has provided it into here, let's strip that off for now, and we'll basically force that we insert it into this URL here. That way we don't accidentally have a double @ sign or something like that. You can see that we're using the WebDriver factory to actually create that WebDriver, so that's great. That hasn't changed. This forces the navigation to the URL, also hasn't changed. And really the last little bit that's different here is that you can see I've kind of doubled up some of the code. It looks doubled, right? Because I'm doing follower and following count. And actually, I've messed this up, which is great that I'm looking at this now. Um, Actually, no, this is accurate. So just to explain for a second, if you're looking at the structure of the HTML that comes back, we're going to be looking for following count because once we find that, not only is the number for your following right there, but your follower count is directly after. So you can see it looks a little bit misleading. It actually tripped me up here. We need this result in both looking for a following count and a follower count because it's just the position where this information starts, and then we can look for each piece of information independently, which is exactly what this does. So we're saying from that spot, we're going to look about 200 characters. It's more than enough. And for the the follower count, we'll look a little bit further. Also, 300 characters is sufficient there. And then the last part is basically doubling up this parsing where we're trying to get the strings converted to integers. And last but not least, we just bundle all of that up into a nice little record. So really didn't change a whole lot. I just kind of refactored where the code is placed and then added following as an addition. So I'm going to go ahead and run this for us. You'll see that I don't have, well, you have to trust that it's not coming up on another monitor for me. but I don't have Chrome launching anywhere. You can see that this is already completed. If I didn't have the logging settings there, this would have filled up with a lot of logs and stuff. It's pretty noisy. But the important piece of information I will highlight right here, and let me zoom in just so it's a little bit more obvious. But this right here, you can see that this is the the record that I created has the profile name as dev leader, profile URL, number of followers, and number of following. And it's great to see that as we've been recording, this number is slowly climbing, so that's awesome. But there you have it, just a small tweak and a little bit of refactors to some of the code that Jamal wrote for us. So thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed seeing like a little bit of refactoring steps that I was taking there. Hopefully the explanations made sense. If you thought this video was interesting, please give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment below if you have any thoughts or questions on sort of the direction that we're heading in. And of course, subscribe if you want to see the rest of the journey for the social media assistant or other programming related content. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.